The spiny foliage of Xylo's prime clawed at Lyra's armor as she navigated the dense undergrowth with practiced silence. Her movements, usually fluid and precise, had become labored. The sticky heat of the jungle pressed against her scaled skin, and her multifaceted eyes constantly scanned for movement among the shadows. As the Empire's most decorated Cthar scout, failure was not an option. Yet here she was, breathing heavily, fighting the urge to rest. Her mission was simple: gather intelligence on Terran troop movements in the contested southern quadrant of the planet. The mission brief had been clear: avoid engagement, document positions, return with data. The Cthar High Command needed this information for their planned offensive, one that would finally drive the despicable humans from their strategic outpost. From early childhood, Lyra had been taught the truth about Terrans. Weak in body, but dangerous in mind. Deceptive creatures who masked savagery with false diplomacy. They were unworthy adversaries who relied on trickery rather than honor, who tortured captured Cthar warriors for sport. The educational holo displays had shown it all. The experiments, the humiliations, the barbaric joy humans took in breaking Cthar pride. Remember, her commander had said during the mission briefing, a Cthar warrior captured is a warrior already dead. Choose death before dishonor. Lyra flexed her hand over her primary pulse rifle, finding comfort in its familiar contours. 3 successful reconnaissance missions had earned her this assignment, the most critical intelligence-gathering operation of the season. The thought of returning to her squadron with vital information sent a ripple of pride through her crest. The distant rumble came without warning. At first, Lyra mistook it for thunder. Xylo's prime was infamous for its sudden electrical storms. But the vibration beneath her feet told a different story. She pivoted, eyes widening at the wall of mud and vegetation bearing down on her position. The landslide moved with terrifying speed, uprooting massive trees as if they were mere saplings. Training took over. She sprang toward higher ground, her powerful legs launching her up the slope. Not fast enough. The roaring mass caught her mid-leap, a solid wall of debris that slammed into her body with crushing force. Pain exploded through her left side as she was tossed like a doll, tumbling and spinning amid the chaos of earth and broken vegetation. When consciousness returned, Lyra found herself half buried in mud and tangled roots. Pain lanced through her body with each shallow breath. Her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle below the knee, and a jagged gash ran along her side, seeping blue-green blood into the soil. Her communicator was gone, likely buried somewhere in the aftermath of the landslide. The pulse rifle, too, had vanished. Panic, a sensation nearly foreign to her disciplined mind, began to creep in. Alone, injured, in contested territory, the warrior's mantra repeated in her mind: pain is temporary. Failure is eternal. With a strangled growl, Lyra dragged herself from the muck, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through her broken body. She still had her sidearm and combat knife. Not helpless then, never helpless. The small cave she found was barely more than an overhang, but offered concealment from both aerial reconnaissance and ground patrols. Lyra wedged herself into the shadows, applying emergency sealant to the worst of her wounds. The military-grade coagulant stung viciously, but it would slow the bleeding. As the immediate crisis of blood loss subsided, a different kind of pain took hold: the searing shame of failure. Her mission was compromised. The intelligence would not be gathered. The offensive might fail without proper reconnaissance. And for what? Defeated not by the enemy, but by mere geology, by simple bad luck. Disgrace burned hotter than her physical injuries. In Cthar society, there were no excuses. Results mattered, not intentions. Her accomplishments would be forgotten. This failure would define her. Night fell over Xylo's prime, bringing strange calls from nocturnal predators and the eerie bioluminescence of native flora. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness, jolting awake at every unfamiliar sound. Fever began to set in, her body's natural healing processes overwhelmed by the severity of her injuries. In her more lucid moments, Lyra considered her options. She could attempt to signal for extraction, but any transmission powerful enough to reach Cthar frequencies would also alert nearby Terran patrols. She could try to make her way back to the forward operating base, but with her leg shattered, the 20-kilometer journey seemed impossible. Or she could wait. Wait for either rescue or death. Neither option appealed to her warrior spirit, but pragmatism dictated patience. It was during one feverish half-dream that she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching her hiding place. Not the heavy, synchronized march of Cthar troops. These were lighter, less regimented. Terran, instantly alert despite her weakened state, Lyra withdrew her combat knife from its sheath. If this was to be her end, she would take at least one enemy with her to the void. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows of her makeshift shelter, ignoring the fresh agony that shot through her broken leg. The footsteps paused just outside. Lyra held her breath. A shadow fell across the entrance to her hiding place, followed by the outline of a figure crouching down to peer inside. Human. Male. Wearing the dusty brown combat fatigues of Terran Medical Corps, identifiable by the Red Cross symbol on the shoulder. He carried a standard-issue sidearm, but it remained holstered. Instead, a handheld scanner swept the opening of her shelter, searching for life signs, no doubt. The moment the scanner detected her presence, the human's posture changed. Not the predatory tension she expected, but something else, caution, perhaps, mixed with surprise. Lyra lunged forward with a ferocious snarl, knife extended, determined to strike fast and decisively. The sudden movement sent lightning bolts of pain through her injured body, compromising what should have been a lethal strike. The knife slashed across empty air as the human swiftly backpedaled out of range. Whoa! The human's voice was deep but not threatening, his hands raised, palms forward in what Lyra recognized as a universal gesture of non-aggression. Easy there. I'm not looking for a fight. The words meant nothing to her. Her translator had been damaged in the landslide, but the tone registered. It lacked the fear or hatred she'd expected. This confused her, adding fuel to her anger. She snarled again, this time in her native tongue. Come closer, Terran filth, and I will show you how a Cthar warrior dies. The human remained outside the cave entrance, maintaining a safe distance. His eyes, an unusual shade of green, studied her with unsettling intensity. Not with disgust or bloodlust, but with what seemed like concern. The very notion was absurd. You're hurt, he said, gesturing to her injuries. He tapped the medical insignia on his uniform. I'm a medic, Sergeant Elias Vance. I can help you. Lyra bared her teeth in what Cthar would recognize as derisive laughter. Help? You wish to help by taking me prisoner? By making me a subject for your experiments? I know how Terrans help my kind. The human, Vance, frowned, clearly not understanding her words, but reading her hostility. He reached slowly into a pouch at his side and withdrew a small translator device. It was an older model, clearly damaged, with wires exposed and the casing cracked. He adjusted something, held it up. Translator. Broken. Mostly works. The device rendered his words into halting, mechanical Cthar. No harm. Medical help. Yes. I would rather die. Lyra's response was immediate, her voice a hiss of contempt. Vance sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. He looked tired, Lyra realized. Not just physically exhausted, but worn down in a deeper sense. This observation disturbed her. Monsters shouldn't look weary. They should look monstrous. He nodded, as if her refusal was expected, then did something truly bizarre. He sat down, just outside the cave entrance, his back against a nearby tree trunk. He kept his hands visible and made no move toward his weapon. Instead, he opened his own medkit and began tending to a minor cut on his forearm, a superficial wound that Lyra hadn't even noticed. Confusion surpassed anger in Lyra's mind. Was this some strange human tactic? A form of psychological warfare? She kept her knife ready, watching his every movement with suspicious eyes. What are you doing? She demanded. The though she knew he couldn't understand her words. As if reading her thoughts, Vance glanced up from his bandaging. Not leaving wounded. Against oath. The translator struggled with his longer sentences. We'll wait. Change mind maybe. This made no sense. Nothing in her training had prepared Lyra for a human who simply waited, who didn't attack, who claimed to follow some sort of healer's oath that extended even to enemy combatants. Minutes stretched into an hour. Vance remained seated, occasionally checking his equipment or surveying their surroundings. He kept a respectful distance, never making sudden movements. At one point, he slowly placed a canteen of water on the ground between them, then returned to his position. Lyra ignored the water, despite her parched throat. It was probably poisoned or drugged. The humans were nothing if not treacherous. Night deepened. Lyra fought against her body's weakening state. The fever was worsening. The sealant on her wound had begun to fail, fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. Each breath came more labored than the last. Still, the human kept his vigil, though he must have. Noticed her deteriorating condition. Why? She finally rasped, her voice barely audible. Why not leave? Or kill? The translator crackled. No one deserves die alone. Enemy, friend. No difference to pain. His answer made as little sense as his behavior. It contradicted everything she knew about humans. They were ruthless, cruel, incapable of seeing Kthar as anything but targets. Yet this one sat peacefully in the darkness, offering help without force, maintaining a distance that respected her wishes. By midnight, delirium set in. Lyra's vision swam with phantom shapes. The cave seemed to contract and expand with each labored breath. Her grip on the knife loosened, though she fought to maintain consciousness. Through the fog of fever, she was dimly aware of movement. The human had finally approached, kneeling just inside the cave entrance. She tried to raise her weapon, to die fighting as a warrior should, but her arm refused to obey. Must treat now, the translator buzzed. Or die. Allow. Lyra wanted to refuse, to spit defiance until her final breath. But a deeper instinct, the will to survive that predated all cultural conditioning, took control of her voice. Yes, she whispered, the word feeling like surrender. Vance moved with efficient care, spreading out medical supplies within reach. His hands, when they finally touched her wounded side, were gentle but firm. He cut away the ruined sealant, cleaned the jagged wound with antiseptic, and began the delicate work of closing the gash. Through feverish eyes, Lyra watched him work. There was no disgust in his expression as he touched her alien skin, no hesitation in treating a physiology different from his own. His brow furrowed in concentration, and he occasionally murmured words that the translator couldn't catch, perhaps instructions to himself or reassurances to her. The strangest sensation crept through Lyra's consciousness. This human was treating her not as a trophy, not as an enemy to be neutralized, not as a specimen to be studied, but simply as a patient, a being worthy of care. The concept was so foreign that at first she had no framework to process it. Leg broken, Vance said after stabilizing the wound in her side. Needs set. Pain bad. Lyra nodded weakly. Do it. The pain when he manipulated her shattered bone was explosive, tearing a scream from her throat that echoed through the small cave. Yet even in that moment of agony, she registered the steadiness of his hands, the apology in his eyes. He worked quickly, splinting the break with materials from both his medkit and the surrounding environment. When it was done, Vance offered her water again, this time supporting her head so she could drink. The cool liquid was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted, and she gulped it greedily until he gently pulled it away. Slow, he cautioned. Too much sick. Exhaustion overcame her then, a bone-deep weariness that not even her warrior's training could resist. As consciousness faded, Lyra was left with one disturbing thought. Nothing about this encounter aligned with what she had been taught about humans. Nothing at all. Morning came with the chattering of native avians and the soft patter of rain on foliage. Lyra woke to find her fever reduced and her pain, while still present, dulled to a manageable throb. Vance was still there, sitting at the cave entrance, watching the rainfall with tired eyes. He had dark circles beneath them. He had not slept. She studied him openly, no longer viewing him primarily as a threat. He was older than she initially thought, perhaps mid-30s by human standards. His face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much combat, with a thin scar running along his jawline and deeper lines around his eyes than his age should warrant. "Why help enemy?" she asked when she noticed he was aware of her gaze. Vance turned to her, considering the question. The translator word as it processed his response was doctor before soldier. Heal first, questions later. It was such a simple answer, yet it challenged everything Lyra had been taught about the fundamental nature of humans. According to Cthar doctrine, compassion was not in their nature, especially not toward her kind. "Your people torture Cthar prisoners," she stated flatly. "Experiments. Pain for entertainment." Vance's expression darkened. "Not true. War crimes happen, yes. Both sides. Not policy. Lies," Lyra hissed, though with less conviction than before. "Show you," Vance said, reaching slowly into a pocket and withdrawing a small hollow projector. He activated it, and a three-dimensional image sprang to life. A smiling human female with two small children, their faces alight with joy as they waved at the camera. Family, fighting to protect. Lyra stared at the projection, unsettled by its ordinariness. These didn't look like the offspring of monsters. They looked not unlike Cthar young, in their expressions if not their appearance. "Why you fight?" Vance asked, turning the question back on her. "Honor," she replied automatically. "Duty to Empire. Terrans threaten Cthar worlds Cthar way." "Same reason," Vance said, gesturing to the hologram. Different words. He put the projector away and offered her a ration pack. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra accepted it. The food was bland but nourishing, compatible with her digestive system. Another indication that Vance had knowledge of Cthar physiology beyond what a common soldier should possess. "Your unit?" she asked between careful bites. "Where?" "Separated. Ambush." 3 days passed. The translator struggled with tenses. "Looking for extraction point when found you." This, at least, explained his presence, though not his solitary state. Human soldiers typically operated in squads, rarely alone. "Others dead," she pressed. A shadow crossed his face. "Unknown. Scattered. Hoping rendezvous South Ridge." Lyra nodded, understanding the tactical situation. Both of them were stranded, cut off from their respective forces. Both injured to varying degrees. Both sharing the same immediate goal, survival. As the rain intensified outside their shelter, an uneasy truce solidified between them. Not friendship, such a thing would be impossible, but a practical arrangement born of necessity. They spoke little throughout the day, each lost in their own thoughts, processing the unexpected reality of their situation. It was near dusk when Vance suddenly tensed, his head tilting in a gesture Lyra recognized as listening intently. She too heard a moment later, a faint, rhythmic humming that didn't belong to Xylos Prime's natural soundscape. "Technology," she whispered. "Not Cthar. Not Terran standard." Vance nodded in agreement, his hand moving to his sidearm. The first time she'd seen him reach for it since their encounter began. Investigate. The suggestion surprised her. That he would propose joint action, that he would consult her opinion rather than simply acting or giving orders. It was yet another behavior that contradicted her understanding of humans. Despite her better judgment, curiosity won out. Yes, but careful. With Vance's help and a crudely fashioned walking stick, Lyra managed to stand. Pain shot through her splinted leg, but it was bearable. Together, they moved slowly away from their shelter, following the strange sound deeper into the jungle. They found its source in a small clearing about half a kilometer away. Embedded in the soft earth, partially obscured by vegetation, lay a fragment of metallic debris. It was clearly part of a larger vessel, its edges torn and melted from what must have been a catastrophic failure. And it was actively emitting energy, hence the humming sound, despite its damaged state. Not ours, Vance confirmed, examining the technology from a safe distance. Not Kthar either, Lyra replied, her multifaceted eyes picking up details as human vision might miss. Design unknown. Material composition strange. As they approached cautiously, Lyra noticed other fragments scattered throughout the clearing. Some bore markings in a script she didn't recognize. Neither the angular glyphs of Kthar nor the rounded characters of Standard Terran. Third faction, Vance suggested, voicing the conclusion Lyra had already reached. Possible. Or, she didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. They were both soldiers experienced enough to understand the implications. If this was evidence of a third party operating covertly on Xylos Prime, it could change the entire strategic landscape of the conflict. Vance knelt beside one of the larger fragments, careful not to touch it directly. Power signature active. Recent crash. Lyra moved to examine a different section, her tactical mind automatically cataloging details. Weapons damage, she noted, pointing to distinctive scarring along one edge. Not accidental failure. They shared a look of mutual understanding. Whatever this was, it warranted investigation, not just for their own curiosity, but potentially for the safety of both their forces. Working together with surprising ease, they gathered what portable fragments they could safely handle and documented the rest with Vance's remaining functional equipment. As full darkness descended, they retreated to their cave shelter, now laden with mysterious technology that neither of them could fully identify. Under the dim light of Vance's tactical lamp, they spread their findings on the cave floor. Lyra's scientific training, though secondary to her military specialization, proved useful as they attempted to make sense of the components. Energy signature matches nothing in Kthar database, she admitted after a careful examination. Same for Terran records, Vance agreed, scrolling through his device. But he paused, brow furrowed in concentration as he aligned two fragments. When fitted together, they revealed part of what appeared to be a navigational chart, one that showed both Kthar and Terran positions with unsettling accuracy. Surveillance, Lyra breathed, the implications sending a chill through her that had nothing to do with her injuries. They watched both sides. Vance nodded grimly. Question is, who are they? And why? They worked late into the night, piecing together fragments of both the physical wreckage and the tactical puzzle it represented. The more they discovered, the more disturbing the picture became. The unknown vessel had been equipped with advanced stealth technology and weapons capabilities that surpassed both Kthar and Terran military standards, significantly so. Most worrying was a partial data core that Vance managed to partially activate using a jury-rig power connection from his equipment. The corrupted files it contained suggested long-term surveillance of not just Xylos Prime, but multiple battle theaters across the contested space between Kthar and Terran territories. Vance struggled to find words, the translator buzzing with his frustration. Wrong, Lyra supplied. All wrong. Their eyes met in the dim light, mutual comprehension passing between them. They had stumbled onto something that transcended their immediate conflict, something that might explain why diplomatic solutions to the Kthar-Terran War had repeatedly failed despite occasional efforts on both sides. If a third party were deliberately monitoring and perhaps even influencing the conflict, the sound of movement outside interrupted their thoughts. Precise, coordinated footsteps, military formation. Your people or mine? Vance whispered, already reaching to extinguish the light. Lyra tilted her head, listening intently. Neither, she hissed back. Different rhythm, different weight distribution. They barely had time to conceal their findings before bright light flooded the cave entrance. Silhouetted against it stood three figures in sleek, form-fitting armor unlike any standard-issue gear from either faction. Their helmets concealed their features entirely, presenting only reflective black visors. Subjects located, announced one in an artificially modulated voice that the translator struggled to process. Containment protocol initiated. Vance moved first, drawing his sidearm with practiced speed. But the intruders were faster. A pulse of energy, not laser, not plasma, something else entirely, struck his hand, sending the weapon clattering to the stone floor. Lyra lunged for her knife, ignoring the screaming pain in her leg. One of the armored figures stepped inside, easily dodging her weakened strike and delivering a precision blow to her wounded side that sent her collapsing in agony. "Resistance inadvisable," stated the leader, training a weapon on Vance as he attempted to reach for his fallen sidearm. "You have accessed restricted technology. Protocol demands termination." "Who are you?" Vance demanded, his voice steady despite their dire situation. "What's your interest in this conflict?" "Classification. Unnecessary information for subjects marked for termination." The cold, mechanical response sent a surge of rage through Lyra's pain-addled mind. After surviving the landslide, after the unexpected alliance with a supposed enemy, after discovering evidence of something greater at work, to die anonymously at the hands of these faceless operatives seemed an insult to everything she valued as a warrior. With a roar that drew on reserves of strength she didn't know she still possessed, Lyra launched herself at the nearest figure. Her attack was doomed to fail, but it created the momentary distraction Vance needed. He dove for the fallen weapon, rolled, and fired in one fluid motion. The energy blast caught one of the attackers in a joint of their armor, eliciting the first indication that whatever was inside the suit was indeed biological. A cry of pain, distorted by the helmet's audio system, but unmistakably organic. Chaos erupted in the confined space. Lyra, pinned down by one assailant, watched as Vance engaged in hand-to-hand combat with another. His movements revealed training beyond standard military hand-to-hand, precise strikes targeting weakness points in the advanced armor. A lucky blow from Lyra's attacker sent fresh waves of agony through her broken leg, nearly causing her to black out. Through the haze of pain, she saw Vance take a hit that slammed him against the cave wall. The third attacker, recovering from the energy blast, raised a weapon to deliver what would certainly be a fatal shot. In that critical moment, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath them trembled, subtly at first, then with increasing intensity. The attackers hesitated, their helmet visors turning toward the cave entrance. "Seismic anomaly detected," one announced. "Increasing magnitude. Recommend immediate evac." The rest of the sentence was lost as the tremor escalated into a violent shaking. Rocks began to fall from the cave ceiling, and a deafening rumble drowned out all other sounds. Lyra felt strong hands grasp her shoulders, Vance pulling her toward the entrance even as their attackers made their own retreat. They emerged into chaos. The jungle around them convulsed as another landslide, larger than the one that had initially injured Lyra, swept down the hillside above their position. Trees toppled, earth heaved, and the night filled with the sounds of destruction. Vance half-carried, half-dragged Lyra away from the collapsing cave, both of them gasping for breath. Through the tumult, they caught glimpses of their attackers racing toward what appeared to be a camouflaged vessel some distance away, only to see it directly in the path of the advancing wall of debris. The landslide engulfed the ship in seconds. A bright flash illuminated the jungle as its power core overloaded, followed by a concussive blast that nearly knocked Vance and Lyra from their feet despite their distance. They didn't stop to witness the aftermath. Supporting each other, they staggered through the undergrowth, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and both the collapsed cave and the destroyed vessel. Only when they physically could go no further did they collapse in the shelter of a massive fallen tree, its upturned root system creating a natural barricade. "Alive," Vance panted, the translator struggling to function after being damaged in their escape. "Somehow," Lyra nodded, too exhausted for words. Her leg throbbed mercilessly, and fresh blood seeped from reopened wounds. But they had survived not just the initial disasters that had brought them together, but a direct confrontation with whatever covert force was manipulating the war from the shadows. As dawn approached, painting Xylo's prime sky in hues of amber and gold, they took inventory of what little they had managed to salvage. One water canteen, half a medkit, Vance's damaged sidearm, a single fragment of the alien technology, a data storage device that had been in Lyra's pocket when the attack came. Most importantly, they had knowledge. Incomplete, dangerous knowledge that made their return to their respective forces complicated at best, potentially fatal at worst. "What now?" Lyra asked as Vance rebandaged her wounds with the remaining medical supplies. He considered the question carefully before responding. "Can't go back. Not yet. Not without understanding." "Agreed," she said, surprising herself with how readily she accepted this human's assessment. "But where?" Vance pointed westward, toward the distant mountains visible through gaps in the canopy. "Old mining outpost. Abandoned early in war. Supplies maybe. Safety from patrols." It was a sensible suggestion. The western territories of Xylos Prime had been deemed strategically insignificant by both sides after the initial mineral surveys had proven disappointing. It would give them time and space to analyze their findings and determine their next move. "Long journey," Lyra noted, glancing meaningfully at her splinted leg. "Slow," Vance shrugged, a very human gesture that Lyra was beginning to recognize as indicating acceptance of an unavoidable difficulty. "No rush," he said. "War waited this long. Can wait more." There was something in his tone, a weariness, yes, but also a hint of something else. Relief, perhaps. The possibility that he, like her, might have harbored private doubts about the conflict even before their discovery. As they prepared to begin their westward trek, Lyra found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. Just days ago, she would have killed this human without hesitation, viewing him as nothing more than an enemy to be eliminated. Now, they were allies bound by shared knowledge and mutual dependence. And it had all begun with that inexplicable moment, when he had treated her wounds not as a captor tending to a prisoner, not as a scientist examining a specimen, but as a healer caring for someone who mattered. "Vance," she said abruptly as they started their slow progress through the jungle. "That first night, you could have left, or taken me prisoner, or kill me. Why didn't you?" The translator struggled with his response, but she caught enough to understand. Because under different stars, different flags. We not so different. Pain same, fear same, hope same. Such a simple truth, yet it challenged everything she had been raised to believe. As they made their way toward the uncertain sanctuary of the mountains, Lyra found herself questioning not just the nature of the war, but the foundations of her own identity. The journey would be long. Recovery would be painful. The truth they sought might prove more dangerous than either of them anticipated. But for the first time since she'd arrived on this contested world, Lyra felt something beyond duty, beyond honor, beyond the rigid constraints of Cathar doctrine. She felt the possibility of a different path, one forged not through conquest or subjugation, but through the simple, revolutionary act of seeing an enemy as a person, of treating a wound as if the life it threatened actually mattered, regardless of species or allegiance. It was a dangerous idea, one that could upend worlds if it spread. And as they disappeared into the depths of Xylos Prime's wilderness, that dangerous idea took root and began to grow.